Fit Organisation. We've discussed it from the perspective of professionals yesterday, people in those roles. We talked about it as from the project perspective, how do you run projects, what do you need to think about in the project space. But if you take a step back, we have speakers representing all disciplines and all industries. How do you actually have a BIM Fit organisation at the 100% scale, not just the digital team? So with that, I'm going to hand over to Amanda and the panelists, and I'll field questions in the audience when the time comes.
Thank you, Khaled. Good afternoon. I hope everyone is well. And welcome to the panelists. I must start with a big disclaimer. We do have plenary sessions and we design the program and everything. But one of my key responsibilities is to make sure that there's value in the conversations, which means if someone has covered something, the prepped question is out because it's been covered and I need to devise a new question. So it's not curved balls, it's just, making use of the time and making sure that our conversations add value. So the morning team has taken away, or rather has given us a framework of BIMing in organizations. We've seen from the back end, if I may put it, that there's quite hefty investments from the tech to training the people to the passion and everything. So now I'd like us to tune into business. It has to make business sense eventually. So even though we have operations and we've got all these amazing technologies, they are run by entities, and those entities not solely exist to give us infrastructure, otherwise it will just be public works, but they also exist to make a profit. It wouldn't be a business now, would it be? So taking that slide cue, I'd like to paint a macro picture for the discussions. And while I paint this macro picture, if I may have any business owners or people who are active in business decisions, if they may kindly come to the front, because I would like you to co-contribute and ask questions to the panelists. I will make sure I protect you. But I would like to open it up to the business owners in the room to also share any questions they may have in this transition towards building BIM Fit organizations. Another big disclaimer I want to make is that may we not make the same fault with digital transformation as we did with health and safety. Digital transformation should never sit outside anybody else's role. In the transition for it being all of our roles, we do have the people that we currently call BIM leaders. But we should never make the mistake of only wearing the hard hat when there's a safety officer in sight. So, businesses, we've got strategic layer, we've got senior management division, we've got operations. I'd like to frame the discussions by looking at how do we actually price for these services which seem to be different to the market? What pricing strategies are different in building BIM Fit organizations? What type of contracting strategies are we looking at? We heard from some of the panelists here that these BIM specialists which exist, these digital leaders, they come at a cost. Our sector is currently competitive as is, with the lowest profit margins in the game. So if we know that a research and development budget comes from the profit that you make and you redirect into the business, if you don't have those profits, how are you currently strategizing to be leaders in the game, operating in the same sector that we know is difficult to survive in? So this is going to go to any panelist. Can you share if your pricing strategies are different? Does it mean your offerings are more expensive? Where are you finding some of this budget to invest into your high-tech operations, which do add value in the efficiency in the long run?
I'll start. I think it's because I don't sit at that level. So I'm going to answer from where I'm sitting. when we go into budget phase every year, from our department side, we need to do a proper investigation. We need to be able to declare and explain and give reasons for every individual, for every software package, for every hardware that we foresee we're going to require in the next year and another year after that. So we do a 12-month and a 24-month budget preparation. As far as I know, we did not change the cost that we charge our clients, but we do try to educate them that the final product that they will get will be more valuable.
Okay, so if I can add to that a little bit. So we've gone through exactly that. And unfortunately, in the game we're playing, you mentioned it, we're in a low kind of margin game in this country particularly. And the biggest savings or efficiencies we've got in terms of where our fee sits is being efficient in how we achieve and deliver projects, right? So our strategy is slightly different to yours. We are a big-ish organization, but not kind of that level. We don't have to go through processes. We don't have to do what we don't have to go through those hoops to do what we need to do. So part of the role that I've taken on is with a couple of my colleagues, we run an R&D division. And we will get, if we see there's something that we need that could help us, we will go and invest in one package, test it, drive it, see if it works, and then pull it through. The main reason being is if you look at our overhead structure within the company, 70%, 75% is staff, and the balance is rent, software, and everything else. And I'm sure most consulting firms are in exactly that same boat, right? So if I can take a task that would take a week and do it in a day, that's the single biggest saving I can get. So it actually saves me money by spending money on the software. And that's the approach we've kind of taken. So there's two sides to it. How do we get the client to now pay for that? Now, very difficult to get a client to go, okay, you need to test drive something, we'll pay you to do it, don't worry. That doesn't happen, we know that. But where we are starting to see a little bit of traction is on the back end side, the management side. How do we get, if a client is, and I'm sorry if I'm using brand names, but if a client is willing to pay for Synergy as a document control platform for site, we are getting them to pay for the ACC licensing that does the same thing and a lot more. And that buys and that brings the collaboration into the team, which makes everybody more efficient once again. So our strategy has been to take the knock on the chin, but to save the human time required to deliver these things. But we are getting more educated as we go.
I'm going to use more world-related kind of motivation. And I work on the investment and development side of businesses. So it's the cost of failure. Woolworths is an example, who's a big tenant that I've been negotiating with for many years, have a very simple philosophy. One bad experience in a Woolworths store costs them 4 years of income. The cost of not adopting the new technology will cost your business in the long run. It's quite simple. So it might be a bit of a hit on the chin up front, but the streamlined kind of nature of what you are producing and what you are creating in the business makes the end experience so much better, and therefore limiting the downside risk or cost of failure. And that's, I think, the biggest motivating point, certainly as an investor and a developer, around where we worked in a very simple system. We failed, and we got it right. Now we can see the benefits, because cost of failure on a construction project, an example, cost you interest, it costs you loss of income, it costs a whole lot of other things, more than just the cost of BIM technology and software.
To add to that, we've worked very closely with them in developing that, and what ends up happening is now we are a very small industry in this country. You know, there's lots of firms vying for the same work. So it elevates us to that next level where you become the first pick amongst your competitors because you can deliver it in such a way.
On a positive note, though, there is customers and clients that is actually seeing the value of adding an additional role to the project. For example, BIM managers, BIM coordinators, And the way we manage that is obviously explaining to the client what this person's role is going to be within the project, and we basically giving that person to you as the client to manage your information better at the end of the day. And then it's all about how you're selling it to your client and how you're explaining it to them. If the client can see the value in having an individual like that on a project, they will be more than willing to fork out the money for it as well.
I actually just want to agree with Elna. So I'm not the wallet in our organization who really deals with the budgeting, but just from our company perspective, I think to justify our fees, it's really to sell the fact that we provide specialist services and we serve niche projects and markets, and that we ultimately deliver, our intention is to deliver quicker, faster, better, projects and products. So I guess that's sort of what we try and sell to our clients and get them to buy in.
So thank you for that. An opportunity to business owners, business leaders, people who are involved in decision making and investment. Is there anyone with a question on this part? Thank you.
I'm not a business owner, but I am a construction management honors student here at Tux. I've always been very enthused by technology and how we could implement it into construction. But upon trying to take that enthusiasm into the industry when I started working last year, it wasn't met with the same sort of enthusiasm back from my superiors. My question is, how do we as enthused members of this event, where we've learned so much, take our enthusiasm back to the companies we work for and convince a skeptical board of directors in their need to invest in something like a BIM future?
Yeah, I think so. So that is a common trend currently, and I think it was discussed in the previous session with regards to who's sitting at the top. So I'm gonna say to you the way I manage that. Same thing happened with me when I started with my company. I had all of these great ideas and I wanted to implement everything digital. 6 years down the line, we're still busy implementing, right? However, I celebrate the small wins. The small victories that I had was getting my board of directors around a table and explaining to them why it is important for them to start looking and start investing in these technologies, because there's going to be benefits in the future. And if your board of directors is going to be futuristic or future-based, they will start listening to you and they will start looking at small things to change. Don't try and go and change big things. If you're going to go with the big things first, they're going to stop you right there and say, this is not how we've done it. This is the way we've done it for the last 30 years is Excel spreadsheets. And that's how it's going to be. Right? So small things.
Or evolutionary. Sorry if I offend anybody by saying this, but I work on a very simple philosophy, and I feel like I'm giving away some of my talk from a little bit later. But it's the 7 Ps, and it's about proper prior planning prevents poor performance. Life is quite simple. Plan it properly, model it properly, roll it out properly, and there are limited surprises. And that's where evolution of technology starts to take us to that level without necessarily even having to put a brick in the ground. And it allows people to integrate and communicate. And I think that's the most important thing amongst our world. And we have engineers, we have architects, and nobody really wants to communicate because they have their role and they're a specialist. But a system and a process and an infrastructure drives communication. Communication is what wins games.
Yeah, and I think to add to that is the biggest piece of advice I would give is don't lose hope. And don't fall into the trap of doing it the way that it's always been done. Always push back and fight for what you want to achieve, because that's the only way that you're going to transform that industry. And I think there was a talk yesterday by Marius, and he's playing in that exact environment where he's from the construction side, he's adopting these policies, he's implementing the policies, his board is listening to him, and he's got great traction. And those are the guys we as professionals want to work with, because they're adopting the technologies that we're using. It makes everybody's life easy. So don't lose hope.
Sorry, Amanda, can I just want to add something to that question? I'm taking a guess. I've got no idea exactly what work you're doing, but maybe it would help to prove that the technology works. Ask permission to get access to a model, get an iPad, load it onto the iPad, walk on site. When they do their inspections, they use drawings, you use your iPad. Show them that it's easier to find the position or look at the clash in your model without shoving it down their throat or showing, look, see, I can show you here. They will eventually pick it up. Someone is going to recognize it. Someone is going to pick it up. So slowly, I think gaining their trust and then showing that it will work. Because that's also, and I do say it with respect, if you, and we mentioned yesterday, a few guys, that you don't know what you don't know. It also works the other way around. The very well experienced guys that used to do it on paper don't know what they can see and get out of the technology because they never used it in their lifetime. So also show them how easy it is to find the information.
Yeah, agreed.
We're going to take the last question in this segment, and then I'll take more questions, but we'll just keep on structuring the conversation for variety, if you'd allow me. I've noted the 2 questions. We'll take this one and then Ed.
Okay, I'd just like to find out, you guys did say that clients are more willing to go towards a BIM environment or wanting like BIM products. But now, when you are, say, tendering, do you guys tender as just saying BIM involved, or is it ISO certification that clients are looking for?
So I'll start off very quickly, then you can deal with it. So when we make that statement, it's a very loose statement in this country at the moment. So, okay, Rich, that's all I wanted to say. Rich, you can carry on.
I'm sorry I'm late. I got caught up in a conversation about changing the world outside. In this country and this region, I think a lot of people who've been in this conversation start using the right language, which is good. It's part of the change process. Sometimes those requirements are half understood, and then they get required in a project, but the implications of executing according to the SANS 19650 standard are totally not understood. So at the moment we're in a very turbulent stage in the industry where some people are asking the right questions but aren't doing the legwork beforehand to enable a project to be done. So we need to see a maturity in all of the different pillars of project delivery, from the planning and delivery to the construction to the operations. Until that properly happens, we're going to stay in the turbulent zone. What is for sure is when you follow those ways of working, it's going to be a little less chaotic on projects, but everyone needs to be there. And the challenge is if the clients aren't asking for it, or if they're half asking for it and they're not paying for it, then it does cause ructions.
Yeah. Also remember that currently delivering projects in BIM in the industry means giving it in 3D. That's what it basically means.
That's what people think, yeah.
Yeah. Locally, yeah.
All right, I've noted the questions, but I want the panel to think about the following questions as the audience also contributes. With the knowledge that you have as practitioners, as practices, as firms, if you're looking at our procurement framework and how our clients procure our services and how we deliver them, what have been some of the core differences, whether it's on the costing, the pricing, or the revenue part? What have been some of the core changes that have happened within your businesses as you transition into the digital realm? And how would you then propose we change our current procurement frameworks, if they should be changed? But what problems have you experienced where you say, if only our procurement could look a bit different, it could help us unlock 1, 2, 3? What would that look like? Because we're in the space where we're informing policy. You are practicing ahead of the policy. So if you are to contribute in that space, how can our procurement frameworks change so that they can at least resemble the value that you are trying to create? Please think of that. We have a question over there.
Hello, am I audible? Hi, I might be coming from a different background. I think I'm not an architect or any of the following, but I think I came here because my boss forced me, but also from from more of a data and information. So I am currently at COCTA, and we have a kind of a new department called the National Strategic Hub. And basically what we are trying to do is centralize the data across the country and analyze it for analytics and ensure that we are obviously delivering services, right, in a more efficient and also data-driven way. So this is why I'm here, but this has been a whole new world for me. But I think the most important question then coming from a government perspective is, I've kind of listened to BIM. I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. This could be very helpful. There's so much potential, especially within supporting local governments when it comes to the older buildings that they have and those life cycles, and also new buildings coming out where I could think of so many examples. When we're looking at networking, we can already think of, okay, if let's say Human Settlements has to build RDP houses, we can already, using some of the data that I've seen here, estimate how much electricity and water is going to probably be used in those locations, and we can look at safety and all of those things from that perspective. So it's wonderful. But I think what I haven't really gotten out of this, and maybe you guys can kind of assist, is how then do we kind of like align BIM to integrate to municipal processes and policies and ensure that it's also aligning to the different frameworks that are in place, right? So for example, we've got I think it's called the Integrated Urban Development Framework. So how does BIM fit into that policy, for example, or that framework? If we're talking about the IDP, how do we bring in BIM into that policy, for example, which is crucial within, your municipalities? So I think for me, that is kind of, what I'd like to kind of hear about and basically understand. So, if I go back, then we can kind of start saying, okay, from a policy perspective, we've got BIM, let's use the data coming out of this to maybe develop new policies, because that's another thing that we want to do. We want to develop policies, but sometimes we're just stuck because we just don't understand these different organizations and what they do. So I think for me that would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. It's a beautiful, beautiful insight. I actually have a question there where we look at larger value chains outside the organization. So I've noted your question. I do have it. It will be part of the larger value chains outside this particular set. Procurement, how can we do things better to unlock the value chain?
I want to go back to her question, but because no, but it links in with procurement.
The other one's a difficult one. Yeah.
It links 100% into procurement. So, all right, how does what you've just talked about link in with the SANS 19650 standard? It does so the following way. 60% of the process that is described in the SANS standard talks about how the appointing parties need to define what they need. Then, once they know what they need, they procure that. And they do that in a very focused manner that makes sure that what they need will be produced. Then projects happen. The end of that standard says, at the end of the project, the appointing party needs to see, did you produce the information I asked for? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, try again. That's how the 19650 way of working supports government. But the onus is now on the institutions, and the conversation I had outside about changing the world was essentially, we've got to do this at a national scale. We've actually got to figure out what information does South Africa Inc. need to operate properly. I think you're starting to look at that, but that's now in your department. As a country, we've got to figure out what is it that we fundamentally need, what information do we need to be managing, as well as we used to do it when we still worked in paper. Remember the way we used to work in the paper world was we had drawing offices and libraries and archives and stores of paper that were properly organized. And then we became digital and became a mess. It's true. So that picture of all the paper, it was all old and dog-eared and brown paper, but it was organized. We've lost that. So as a country, we've got to get that right. Then that information requirement is what needs to be used in procurement. Because then you ask the project to deliver information, and the project gives you back information, and that circular motion happens. Amanda, I honestly believe that that's one of the most fundamental things.
Thank you so much, Rich. I agree with how you kind of inserted it with the bigger question. Awesome. But now, here's a picture. Why are we talking procurement and why are we opening this value chain and how is it a question for a BIM Fit business? The responses have been that we've got this client that unlocks business for us. There is a parallel fraternity that makes more money than our engineers here or our architects, even though they are not specialists in this sector, and that's the law fraternity. The amount of disputes and errors and claims and the fights we have amongst each other enrich another sector. How do we claim that money back into our value chain? Because that's money lost. All because of how our contracts are currently structured. So I'm going back to procurement and I'm saying, how do we make things right so that we don't have this bulk law fraternity that is making money because we can't work together or because our contracts are not structured the way that service how we do business? Have we mapped any amount of errors and claims and professional disputes amongst the firms? Anyone? Have we got any data that says, since we've been digital, we've reduced our budget of errors? We are talking about a transition. Engineers who are sitting on their desk are worried about that level of accuracy. The moment you introduce something new, this person has got a professional license and professional pressure to deliver. So while we are looking at the errors and the disputes, how can we structure our contracts better for business? It's an open question, because we need digital businesses that are fit to do digital business and improve efficiency. Contractually, what are we looking at?
Yeah, I think it's a far deeper seated issue than that, and we could spend 5 days in this auditorium discussing exactly that, because, you know, we talk about fees and procurement at national level, we've got it. Everything's gazetted, but it actually means nothing. It's on paper. You go to any developer locally in this country, they look at the fee scales and they go, okay, we'll put that there, and this is what we're willing to pay you. Yeah. And that is the single biggest struggle we have in this country at the moment, is there's a, I don't want to say lack of respect, maybe that's the wrong word, but there's a lack of the understanding of the value chain that a professional team brings to the project. So you highlighted the point 100%. So they begrudgingly pay the fees on the one side, but they'll pay the lawyers, no problem on that side, and they're not discounting the lawyers' fees, but our fees are discounted, so we actually can't deliver the project. And that is the systemic problem that we have currently as an industry. How do we fix it? Like I say, that's a very, very broad discussion.
Maybe to go to a point, and I know we're referring to client the whole time, but client is not specifically the person who actually pays the check.
Correct.
If I worked for Waterfall City for many, many years, wonderful, and I'll put up some stuff later on it. But when you look at a project, and it refers to a new building, the clients that are affected by it are commuters. They are they're pedestrians. It's stormwater management, it's traffic impacts, it's everything else, not just the building itself. And when you drive procurement, and this is something that Dubai has done particularly well, and London in particular are starting to look into it quite granularly, is that they're looking at it from a spatial development framework, that you submit your drawings on BIM. So they can implement that project into their current master plan to see what the implications are, not on the person paying the check, but on every other person who will be affected by that development. That's how you change procurement. You change it from the bottom up, from grassroots level all the way through, because there's nothing like building a building and then all of a sudden stopping traffic. I think Cape Town was a great example many years ago, where you see the freeway that comes to an end. Unbelievable infrastructure, but there was no ability to expand the roads inside the CBD, so they shut them down. The US was a great example as well of building those huge freeways. The implication was on the people trying to get there. And when you start looking at it from a macro perspective and drawing it down to a micro perspective, that implication of your micro deal that you are doing will have a far greater macro effect on all clientele. And that's what drives procurement change.
Mine is the opposite, but I'm in a different space. We build big plants for mining clients, and we need, in most cases, need to buy very large, very expensive equipment, order it, manage it, install, get it to run commissioning on the plants, etc. So we can't do a design without any of those information. Big screens, crushers, pumps, etc. So we're updating our contracts at the moment to define exactly what we want in our models, what data should there be at which phase of a preliminary drawing and the final certified drawing. It's small steps, and we from the engineering department can put that on paper now. There's race that will follow with the other departments, but it's sometimes daunting if you look at the big picture. But tackle the bit that you do have the info for now and get that addressed.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, so you see what is happening currently is that the professional team is currently pushing for how we would like to have information. We're doing that. In reality, our clients need to employ someone to actually do that for them if they don't have the ability to do that. And it's actually part of ISO as well, SANS as well, that the client or the lead appointed party needs to employ someone that is going to manage their information for them if they cannot do it themselves. So we're taking the steps of putting specifications and processes in place so that we can make our task easier, right, in producing the information, where it originally or actually it needs to come from our clients.
Thank you very much for that. Right into my next question. Thanks, Gary. I'll take your hand now, sir. For many years in South Africa, I think this case probably lasted for 10 to 12 years. There was a serious case at Competitions Commission. And the case was around other specialists being registered as construction project managers. I'm not sure if the House is aware of this. So there's specialization. We've got councils. We've got engineers who are registered both at EXA and at SACPCMP. We've got architects who are registered at both as professional architects and as project managers. I'm going to throw this in now so that we learn from the past, isn't it? We do know that there's this person that needs to be on the know in terms of helping the client craft all of these requirements. So with the SANS, the first 3 SANS that are adopted from ISO 19650 here in SA, in your view of this digital value chain, what would be the characteristics of this person who the client now needs to appoint? Because we need to give framing to it. We're not at a point where we can regulate and say the client needs to appoint a professionally registered construction project manager. That is no longer enough, because that kind of expertise doesn't come with that digital competence as yet. But as we transition, who can hold that head amongst these different industries and specialties that we have?
So I can answer that from what we've tried in-house and then extrapolate that out. Answering that question involves a couple of different ways of thinking. The one is understanding systems. So just knowing, if you want to do a process, what inputs and outputs are there. You need to understand a bit about policies and procedures, because whatever you're trying to do needs to achieve a certain purpose according to a certain set of rules. You've got to understand technology, because you can't just say there's going to be this thing in the sky that manages things. You've actually got to break it down into realistic portions. And the type of qualification that's worked the best in that space is an industrial engineer or a systems engineer. Someone who has been trained to unpack complex environments into processes and then understand what influences those processes to work as intended. And that person, surrounded by support staff who can then drill into the IT side of things and drill into the engineering information side of things. But I think that from our perspective, seems to have worked in the past.
Yeah, and what we're seeing with some of our international clients is they don't employ one person. They've got a series of people to fulfill that role. So you have somebody looking after the MEP, you've got somebody looking after interiors, you've got somebody looking after architecture, somebody looking after landscape, etc., etc. And they, in turn, have been trained to a point in the digital environment, and how is that managed, and they have put their requirements forward on what they're looking for and what they're looking to achieve. Yeah. But
Thank
so
you very
far,
much. Yeah.
Very limited here.
Sure. Just maybe for everyone's discussion, this was more centered around the person that we currently call the principal agent. So how do we add more features to that person so that no matter who they are, as an industry, we feel these are the features you need to have if you are to be a principal agent type of conversation. Yes, sir.
I don't know how relevant my question is, but it was quite a while ago. When Letitia talked about cultures, my hair stood on end, because a philosopher once said that culture is a lie told to people to keep them civilized. And essentially we're in an evolutionary race, and the fittest survive in terms of your organizations that you're talking about here. So what you bring to the table is vital, but also what you conform to in terms of standards is also vital. So that's why you've got your SANS, etc. But to impose a new culture and throw out an old culture is not the way to go, I see. I see it as an evolutionary, chaotic situation which is managed through thought leaders. No question.
Thank you for that contribution. Right on point, right on point. Do we have any other questions that we kept?
Yes, one here and then one there.
Sure. And two more here.
Hello, so my name is Emil. I'm an architect from the Northern Cape. I'm working in a small firm at the moment. My question for the panel is, how do you entice the client to become part of the BIM process? For example, on smaller to medium projects, renders and technical like VR, they sell to the client the project for them to procure, give them money to build the project at the end. How do you guys entice ignorant clients that only care about the final product and not the process and the afterwards, when the building is built, when the design process is over? How do you guys go on making sure the client understands the meaning of BIM and how they can manage the building when they're ignorant to the process and only care about the end result? Thank you.
It's a very, Gary, you're 100% right. It's a very difficult question, because it goes to individuality. It depends on which client you're dealing with at which time, So all I can talk to is the process that we've used and adopted, and it's very simple tools, but we use these tools as part of our design process. So we don't arrive on site and go, ooh, that's not exactly what I was envisaging, because in a 2D drawing it kind of looked different to that. So we use that ability, and we use the tools available to us, and we give the client access to those tools. And that's where I was talking earlier about ACC. The client can go and navigate the model themselves with no prior knowledge of any software platform anywhere. It's just a web browser, and you just rotate around it and do what you need to do. And people I've found, and clients I've found, tend to get excited about that kind of thing, and that's where the buy-in starts. Even if they're not interested in the beginning, by the time you get to the end, they're going, oh, that's quite cool, let me do this, and what about, and they can start getting into the nitty-gritty, yeah.
I also want to add to that, first of all, it really depends on your type of client, but apart from the fancy pictures and the 3D renderings and that you can sell it with, I think, another part is like if you are dealing with a bigger client, it's the operational phase of the project, what comes after. Once you've delivered the product to the client, the benefit they have from an asset management perspective and from a facilities management perspective, if they have that, let's say, we call it an asset at the end of the day, how they can leverage that and the information that's in that asset, to make their life easier, and also for their, management and, facilities. Yeah.
I am actually on the floor, but I'd love to answer your question about small clients, especially from architecture and small projects. Often people think BIM is for big work. And yesterday I made a little comment on an experience I had with a very, very small project, almost negligible. And it's helpful to think there's BIM for me, there's BIM for you, and there's BIM for us. And often BIM for me is just as helpful as it is for BIM for you. But you don't need BIM for us to be successful. BIM for me can take out 2, 3 hours, 4 hours of my workday, regardless of my client. BIM for you could take out 3, 4 hours of your workday, regardless of your client. BIM for us, if you have a good client, is a different story. So think of it like that. All right. Next question.
Sorry, if Kelly, just adding to that as well. It's also depending on your approach. If you want the client to pay for BIM for us, and it's a small client, he's not going to do it. But if it's BIM for you to optimize your process and your workflow, you can still do it.
And this is a question we get often in these panel discussions is, oh, I'm a small firm, it doesn't make sense for me to do it. That is where it makes the most sense to do it, because that's where you're going to save the most time in your delivery, and time in a small practice is more critical than a big practice. Absolutely.
Okay, hello everyone again. Let's say a business were to take on BIM and follow, really invest in it. How would it work exactly? Like, are you then, let's say a business takes on BIM, are they then officially part of BIM, or is it more of a thing of, let's say they put in a tender and they decide, okay, this is a big project, they probably would want BIM, it makes it look good, let's put it on, one of the things that we have, part of our list. If it's a smaller project, or maybe even a project where that, the budget is tight, let's not use BIM in that instance. Is it like an on-off situation, or is it a thing of, we part of BIM and that's it, and we stand for BIM, and yeah. And then just to extend on that, if it is a case of that you can kind of switch on and off when it comes to like the BIM name or having it under as a part of your business, is it a thing of you can almost like, I wouldn't say tender out, but let's say you do have a big project and you are a small firm, that you have, like, there was a mention of you have 4 team members, 5 team members, that you say, okay, for this project we need this type of person to make this better, that you reach out to maybe like, I don't know, a BIM organization or something like that, to not tender out, but I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. But yeah, that's my question, thanks.
I think I can give a nice example of the journey that you will take in adopting this way of thinking and working. Going from a typewriter, which is a brilliant tool to be able to put letters on a piece of paper, to working on a Word document where you and a number of your teammates are working on a report together, where each of you can work on a separate chapter, but it's on SharePoint, which means that you can actually all open that Word document at the same time, right? That change from one person on a typewriter to multiple people collaborating on a Word document is a nice analogy to the shift from a non-integrated, non-collaborative way of working to a collaborative way of working. BIM as a term is an attempt to try and describe that process of improvement. So it's not like we switch BIM on or off. It's we make a transition from let's stop using typewriters, let's all buy MS Word and a SharePoint license, and let's collaborate. Once you've done that, and maybe that speaks to the Northern Cape example, once you've done that, I don't want to go back to a typewriter, because when you figured out how efficient you are collaborating, you want to keep doing that. And then you start discovering, well, okay, in addition to that, I can bring other people, I can share the document and get comments back. That's the journey that we're talking about. And maybe we should have started this whole thing of explaining that process. And then there's lots and lots of technologies that make bits and pieces of that even more useful and clever. But fundamentally, that's the change.
I mean, first of all, BIM's not a cult. So I'm not going to welcome you to the society. BIM is a framework and an infrastructure. And I think it's, again, it comes back to the mindset. It's really a framework and infrastructure to aid many additional things. So it's not something you necessarily want to switch on and off. It's something that you do and you follow. And it's a safety net, certainly with SANS 19650, that ensures that you follow a specific process of approvals to get to a common goal and objective.
All right, we'll allow for just 2 more questions, and I'll do a closing remarks type of question to the panelists. So just 2 more, one there and last one there. Thank you. We still have an allowance for Q&A later on. We just want to keep on time. It is Friday. We don't want to talk to empty seats after the break. So there's still more time to ask questions. Just come back later.
So I think this is a premature question on my side because I haven't done a lot of research on it. But one of my mentees 2 weeks ago asked me this question, so I think let me deliver it to you guys because you're the experts. Why does it have to take so long for civil engineers to get their professional registrations? So my mentee asked me, he compared us to accountants. Now there are different bodies, there are different paths, or there are different routes to professional registrations. Why do we have to take 5 years, 10 years to be professionals and only to earn a decent salary? So there's been a thing that is going on that we are losing quality civil engineers at an alarming rate in South Africa. I honestly don't think that we are losing civil engineers. There's just a small percentage of it. And I think the reason why these people are leaving is because of this hefty process of AXA, SAIC, and ICE. And they go to other places to, get that certification or whatnot, and then they come back to South Africa and they're considered as one of the best. Why does it take so long? The last one, the last one is, when you go to university, tertiary institutions, engineers are not taught leadership. And when you go into SRC levels, there isn't any interest of engineering leadership. Engineers are not taught to be leaders. How can you guys as industry professionals and companies actually drive these conversations of engineering leadership in tertiary institutions?
Shall I give a short answer? Okay. That's a huge question, and that's the kind of thing you'll debate at length in your SAIC branch. Short answer, it does take a lot of time to tick all the boxes towards registration. I have heard of people who've done it in less than 3 years. And I think it depends on what you are given the opportunity for exposure to be able to gain all the experience. So yeah, but I think that's a very large topic and probably one I can chat to you over lunch about.
I am happy to have a conversation with you offline as well, just to explain the duration to registration and professionalization and all of that. You think it's bad for engineers, imagine being a doctor. You study for 7 years and your doctorate is still not as the doctorate as a PhD, it's just, they call it an undergrad doctor. So yeah, I can chat to you all about that. We had a last question there. We've pinned your question. We're happy to converse on it. Yes, my lady.
Thank you. I just want to ask from the panel, the discussion, I think it revolves around the projects in the private sector. Do you have any case studies or projects that are implemented in the public sector? If not, what is our state of readiness in terms of the transition on the BIM framework? I also would have loved if CIDB was also part of this in terms of integrating the framework, the BIM framework, into the standards from their side and aligning with the National Treasury as to how are we improving or how are we doing the transition into BIM framework integrated into public sector projects. Thank you.
Did you see how excited Amanda got for that question?
Yeah, I'm like, ooh, I can answer that. May I please answer that at 14:05 when the City of Cape Town presents how they integrated the BIM framework. So yeah, we have a long answer for you. Special presentation just for you, my lady.
You have to stay.
Yes, we had the last gentleman at the back. Do you still remember your question? Awesome. So that's the last one from the audience, and then I will ask a closing remarks type of question.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's two groups of people that it would be interesting to hear from. The one is small firms, because as you mentioned, I think there's a lot of value for BIM and process automation in small firms, and certainly we found in our firm it's been really useful. And the other one is clients like retail clients, like big property owners and REITs who already see the value of having this information in-house. And a lot of them have built their own systems, some of them, just using polylines in AutoCAD to control their rental recon and whatever. But there's a lot of those firms, those big clients who've already been doing this in-house, and before 19650 was a thing, but they've seen the value, and some of them don't talk about it because that's their competitive edge. But if we could use those case studies, it would be easier to convince our clients of the value of knowing what every square meter in your buildings are doing, and even how big all your buildings are, because some landlords don't know that.
Thank you so much for that. I think it adds to the question I was going to ask. In concluding remarks, can you share any highlights, moments of satisfaction, your best moments as you transitioned into this digital realm in your businesses? And just to show how it adds to what's been asked, have you witnessed any other forms of revenues outside your core business because you've gone digital? So it may be an excitement of a revenue you've identified, a business that you are now selling because you are digital, or it may be just an excitement from practice to say, hey, this is an amazing highlight that I can share since this transition has happened within the firm or within the practice. Just closing on a very happy note. I hope, don't look sad now because we're talking.
There's lots of happy notes.
Oh.
So it actually had, one of them for me was this week. So we've got, I like to think we've got a great culture in the office, because we've got I think our average length of employment in our office is about 16 years at the moment across our 70 odd people. So we take great pride in that, because it means that we're doing something right, or people just want to sit and earn a salary, but I don't think it's that, right? But I had a guy come to me this week, and he's been involved in a particularly stressful project over the last 3 months. And he came to me, he's been with us for 24 years now, and he said, I've learned more in the last 3 months than I have in the last 5 years. Because he's been thrown in the deep end, he's been given an opportunity to do something he's never done before, and he really blossomed into this kind of wow moment. He was firmly based in a 2D environment, that's how he worked. He's now, so he's transformed himself over the last 3 months into this kind of acolyte about where we're moving with BIM, so that's fantastic. And then just on your question over there, I've been fortunate enough, I started off in a very small firm. I had a tiny little firm down in PE, and that's when I started my BIM journey, because we had to differentiate ourselves a little bit. And that started this process for me. We were able to do things that other guys couldn't do, and that was almost 20 years ago now. And that has transformed into our bigger clients, where we've convinced 3 of our big clients, I think Waterfall's one of them, in that they need to adopt these processes for their own benefit. So it's been fantastic to watch that transformation. Yeah.
I think for me, we've managed to actually secure 3 projects where we've been sort of employed as the information manager lead on the projects, and that is duly because of the processes that we follow, the way our workflows work within, so multidisciplinary engineering. So that's where it's come from. And for me, the highlight was actually getting those letters and being told, okay, you're going to actually manage this process for us, and we've been employed to actually do it for a client, and we're not doing MEPF engineering. We're just doing the information management, which is fantastic. Yeah.
I think on a personal level, it's years back. We did one of the very first 4D projects in 2010. It was one of the biggest coal mines, processing plants at that stage that we built. And I still think back to those 4 years, the toughest project, but the biggest lessons. And I still apply all the lessons that I've learned during that time on everything that I do now. We've got a few good stories within our company, and I'm very proud to say that, well, we're still using BIM 360. We haven't migrated to ACC yet. Long history behind that. But my 2 account managers that assist me on setting up all projects, doing all the invites for the global company, are 2 guys that don't have a metric qualification, but they wanted to grow and to learn. They work in a digital space. They manage basically multi-billion rand projects because of the digital space. It sounds daunting, but it's not that difficult. It's really possible to upskill and teach people to get them to work in that space.
So I think for me, from a personal and a business perspective, it's really the time savings that you get, doing things faster, smarter, also the insights that you are able to get from better data and how you can leverage that, the quality of your product that you are able to deliver, and that also ties in with the experience that you are able to provide to your client, and also give you that competitive edge in the market.
I think I had a moment a couple of weeks ago when a particularly challenging team in our company had a breakthrough. They had a lot of resistance, and then we had a show and tell session in the morning, and I saw this web-based collaboration space where the client and the project team had a look at this 3D model of this huge big piece of infrastructure. And there was comments being assigned, and there was traceable activities happening, and there was evidence that the whole team had just, in the last 2 months, done that. And it was that incredible feeling of, there is hope. Because some days you get so frustrated, because why aren't you guys getting it right? And then there's this moment where it's just it happened. And I think those moments are incredible. And then I think probably the biggest highlight for us is we were able to get a certification this year, which was just out of this world. And the team that worked behind that did an incredible job. So, yeah.
I'm going to say wait for the next exciting installment. I'm up next.
That brings us to the end of this particular session. Please give my panel a round of applause. And yourselves.
Thank you so much.